A poor farmer found a huge horse tied to a tree with a note. What happened next was terrifying. The October wind swept across the barren fields of eastern Montana, carrying with it the scent of dried earth and distant rain. Ethan Walker had lived on his family's failing farm for 37 years, watching the land slowly die beneath his calloused hands. His wife had left him 3 years ago, taking their daughter Grace to Billings, where opportunity still existed. Now, at dawn, he walked alone through rows of withered corn, checking the irrigation system that barely functioned anymore. The sun was just breaking over the horizon when he saw it, a massive dark silhouette against the dying cottonwood tree at the eastern edge of his property. Ethan squinted, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp morning air. As he approached, his heart began to pound. It was a horse, but unlike any he'd ever seen. The animal stood at least 18 hands high, with a coat so black it seemed to absorb the morning light. Its muscles rippled beneath glossy skin, and its eyes, intelligent and watchful, followed Ethan's every movement. A piece of paper, yellowed and wrinkled, was tied to the horse's halter with twine. Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for it, his fingers numb from the cold. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Take care of him until sunset. Don't look back. Don't call anyone. Your daughter's life depends on it. A desperate father." Ethan's blood turned to ice. Grace, his 12-year-old daughter. The paper slipped from his fingers and danced away in the wind. He fumbled for his phone, but then stopped. The note had been clear. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this a prank? A threat? But the mention of Grace was too specific, too personal. No one in their small community of 48 people would joke about something like this. The horse whinnied softly, as if sensing his distress. Ethan noticed the animal was well fed, groomed, and wore an expensive leather halter. This wasn't some abandoned farm horse. He ran his hand along the animal's neck, feeling the warmth and strength beneath. On the horse's left flank, he noticed something, a brand mark, but it had been recently burned over, the scar tissue still pink and healing. "Who are you?" Ethan whispered to the horse. "And what have I gotten myself into?" By mid-morning, Ethan had moved the horse into his old barn, giving it water and the last of his quality hay. He'd tried calling his ex-wife Madison 4 times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at his chest. He paced the barn floor, the wooden planks creaking beneath his boots, while the horse watched him with those eerily calm eyes. At 11 o'clock, his neighbor's truck pulled into the driveway. Jack Patterson, a retired sheriff's deputy who lived 2 miles down the road, climbed out with his usual coffee thermos in hand. Jack was 62, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent under the Montana sun. "Ethan, you all right?" Jack called out, noticing the younger man's pale complexion. "Saw you weren't at the feed store this morning. Emily mentioned you always pick up supplies on Tuesdays." Emily Rodriguez ran the only feed store in their small town of Copper Ridge. She was also the closest thing they had to a veterinarian, having grown up on a horse ranch before studying animal science in college. "Jack, Ethan hesitated, remembering the note's warning. But Jack had known him since childhood, had helped him bury his father. If he could trust anyone, it was Jack. "I need to show you something, but you have to promise to keep it quiet." Inside the barn, Jack let out a low whistle. That's a Dutch warm blood if I've ever seen one. Easily worth $40,000-$50,000. "Where did you?" "I found it this morning, tied to my cottonwood tree with this." Ethan handed him the note, watching Jack's expression darken as he read. "Grace," Jack said softly, "have you heard from Madison today?" "Nothing. She's not answering." Jack pulled out his phone, his law enforcement instincts taking over. "I'm calling Tyler Morrison at the station. He's a good deputy, discreet. And Emily, she might recognize this horse or the brand." Within an hour, Emily arrived with Tyler. a young deputy with sharp eyes and a notebook that never left his hand. Emily approached the horse carefully, her dark eyes scanning every detail. At 34, she had a reputation for being able to read animals better than most people could read each other. "This brand," she said, running her fingers gently over the scarred tissue, "it's been deliberately obscured, but I can still make out part of it. This looks like the Blackwood Ranch mark. That's a private breeding facility about 90 miles north of here, near the Canadian border. They breed competition horses for wealthy clients." She paused, her face troubled. "But Blackwood Ranch has been in the news. The owner, Richard Blackwood, was investigated last year for money laundering and ties to a trafficking ring." Tyler's pen stopped moving. "Trafficking? What kind?" "The kind that involves people," Jack said grimly. "I remember that case. FBI involvement, but nothing stuck. Blackwood had expensive lawyers, connections in state government." Ethan felt his knees weaken. "My daughter, what does this have to do with Grace?" Tyler made calls while the others waited in tense silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the barn floor, and with each passing hour, Ethan's anxiety grew. Finally, at 3 o'clock, Tyler's phone rang. His face went white as he listened. "That was Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's Helena office," Tyler said slowly. "There was an incident at Blackwood Ranch last night. A man named David Thornton, an accountant who worked for Blackwood, apparently tried to steal this horse and flee. He left behind a wife and daughter at a location they were being held. Agent Chen says Thornton discovered Blackwood was running a human trafficking operation disguised as an employment agency for ranch workers. When Thornton threatened to go to the authorities, Blackwood took his family. But what does this have to do with Grace?" Ethan's voice cracked. Emily pulled up something on her phone. "Ethan, what's Madison's maiden name?" "Thornton. Madison Thornton." "Why?" The barn fell silent except for the horse's quiet breathing. Emily turned her phone toward him, showing a news article from the Helena Independent Record. The headline read, "FBI raids Blackwood Ranch following anonymous tip." Beneath it was a photo of a man in handcuffs, David Thornton, and in the background, partially visible, was a woman who looked remarkably like an older version of Madison. That's Madison's cousin, Sarah Thornton," Ethan whispered. "I met her once at a family reunion years ago. She married David Thornton." Jack put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. The note said, "A desperate father. David Thornton left you the horse because he thought Blackwood's men might come looking for it. It's evidence. But more than that, he was probably trying to lead them away from wherever his wife and daughter are being held. He used your name, mentioned Grace, to make sure you'd take it seriously." Tyler was already on the phone again, this time speaking rapidly with Agent Chen. After a tense conversation, he hung up. "The FBI raided Blackwood's secondary property an hour ago. They found 5 people being held there, including David's wife Rachel and their 8-year-old daughter Lily. They're safe. Madison and Grace are fine. They're in Billings, completely unaware of any of this." Ethan's legs gave out, and he sat heavily on a hay bale. Relief washed over him like a physical wave, but it was mixed with anger and confusion. Why didn't David just go to the police? "Because Blackwood has connections," Jack explained. "Local sheriff in that county is suspected of being on Blackwood's payroll. David probably didn't know who to trust. So he took the most valuable thing he could find, this horse, which represents Blackwood's legitimate business front, and tried to create a trail that would eventually lead law enforcement to the truth." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Tyler received another call. His expression shifted from relief to alarm. "2 vehicles just left Blackwood Ranch heading south," he said. Before the FBI could secure the entire property, some of Blackwood's security team got away. Agent Chen thinks they might be coming after the horse. It's registered in Blackwood's name, worth a fortune. And more importantly, it's evidence of his legitimate business operations. Without it, they can prove the trafficking, but have a harder time unraveling the money laundering. Jack moved to the barn door, looking out across Ethan's property. How long until they might get here? Could be 90 minutes, could be 3 hours if they don't know exactly where the horse is. But David's truck was found abandoned about 20 miles from here. They'll follow that trail. Ethan stood up, a newfound determination replacing his fear. Then we need to move the horse, get it somewhere safe. We could take it to my place, Emily suggested. I have a secure stable, and it's off the main road, less obvious. But before they could act, the sound came, low and rumbling at first, then growing louder. It wasn't supernatural or mysterious. It was the unmistakable roar of multiple engines approaching fast along the dirt road that led to Ethan's farm. "They're here," Tyler said, his hand moving to his service weapon. "Everyone stay calm." 2 black SUVs skidded to a stop in front of the barn, kicking up clouds of dust that glowed amber in the dying light. 4 men emerged, dressed in dark clothing, their faces hard and professional. These weren't local thugs. They were trained security personnel, the kind hired by wealthy men who needed to keep secrets buried. The tallest one, a man with a scar running down his left cheek, spoke first. "We're here for the horse. Hand it over and we'll leave peacefully." Tyler stepped forward, his deputy's badge catching the last rays of sunlight. "This property is under federal investigation. That horse is evidence in an ongoing FBI case. You need to leave. Now." The scarred man smiled without humor. "Deputy, you're in over your head. That horse belongs to Richard Blackwood. We have papers to prove it." "Papers won't help you when you're facing federal charges for obstruction of justice," a new voice rang out. Agent Sarah Chen emerged from an unmarked car that had pulled up silently behind the SUVs. She was flanked by 4 FBI agents, all with weapons drawn. "Gentlemen, you're under arrest." What happened next unfolded in tense, rapid minutes. The security team, seeing they were outmaneuvered, attempted to retreat to their vehicles. 2 were apprehended immediately. The other 2 made it to one SUV and sped off, but Agent Chen was already on her radio, coordinating with state police units that had been stationed along the highway. As the last of the sunset faded and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Ethan stood in his barn doorway, watching the FBI agents secure the scene. The sound that had broken the silence wasn't mysterious or supernatural. It was the sound of desperate men trying to cover up crimes, and the sound of justice finally catching up to them. 3 weeks later, Ethan sat on his porch as an early November snow fell softly across his fields. The horse, officially named Midnight Valor, as they'd discovered from the registry, had been taken into FBI custody as evidence. But Agent Chen had promised that once the case was closed, if no one claimed him, Ethan would have first right to adopt the animal. A car pulled up, and Ethan's heart lifted. Madison stepped out, followed by Grace, who was bundled in a purple winter coat. His daughter ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, holding her tight. "Dad!" Grace laughed. "Mom told me everything. Is it true? You helped catch bad guys." "I just took care of a horse, sweetheart," Ethan said, but he was smiling. Over Grace's head, he met Madison's eyes. She walked up slowly, and for the first time in 3 years, there was no distance between them. "Thank you," Madison said quietly, "for protecting her, even when you didn't know if she was really in danger. She's my daughter. I'd do anything." Madison nodded, then surprised him by sitting down on the porch step beside him. "Sarah called me yesterday. Rachel and Lily are doing well, going through counseling. David took a plea deal. He'll testify against Blackwood in exchange for a reduced sentence. 5 years instead of 20. Rachel is grateful to you. We all are. Over the next few days, as the snow continued to fall, something unexpected happened. Emily stopped by with supplies for the farm, not because Ethan had ordered them, but because she wanted to help. Jack came over to repair the barn door that had been hanging crooked for months. Tyler, off duty, brought wood for the fireplace and stayed for dinner, telling Grace stories that made her laugh. The community, small as it was, had rallied around Ethan in a way he'd forgotten was possible. He'd spent so long isolated, drowning in debt and loneliness, that he'd forgotten what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. A month after the incident, Ethan received a call from Agent Chen. Blackwood had been sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. The trafficking ring had been dismantled, and 17 people who had been held against their will were now free. The horse, Midnight Valor, could be released. "There's one more thing," Agent Chen said. "The sale of Blackwood's assets is generating funds for victim compensation. As a thank you for your role in this case, the FBI is arranging for you to keep the horse. Additionally, there's a reward from an anonymous donor, $50,000, for your assistance in breaking the case." Ethan was speechless. $50,000 would save his farm, would give him a real chance to rebuild. That evening, as he stood in his barn with Emily helping him prepare a stall for Midnight Valor's return, Madison appeared in the doorway with Grace. "We've been talking," Madison said, her voice tentative but warm. "Grace misses the farm, misses you, and I forgot what it was like here. The peace, the community, the man I married." She paused. "We'd like to come home, Ethan." Ethan looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at Madison's genuine expression, at Emily's encouraging smile, and then out at his snow-covered fields. The land that had seemed like a dying dream now felt full of possibility. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that very much." As winter deepened and then gradually gave way to spring, Ethan Walker's farm began to transform. The money from the reward went into new irrigation systems and equipment. Madison returned with Grace, bringing with her a determination to make things work. Emily became not just a friend, but a business partner, helping Ethan transition part of his land to sustainable horse breeding, starting with Midnight Valor, who turned out to be one of the finest studs in the region. Jack continued to stop by most mornings with coffee and advice. Tyler became Grace's mentor, teaching her about responsibility and justice. The small community of Copper Ridge, which had once felt like a place people left behind, became home again. On warm evenings, Ethan would walk out to the old cottonwood tree where he'd found Midnight Valor that October morning. He'd think about David Thornton, a desperate father who'd made impossible choices to save his family. He'd think about how one moment, one decision to help rather than ignore, had changed everything. The note that had started it all was framed on his wall now, a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying moments lead to the most beautiful transformations. Not through magic or miracles, but through human courage, community support, and the simple decision to do what's right, even when you're afraid. As Ethan watched the sun set over his fields, now green with new crops, and heard Grace's laughter mixing with Madison's voice from the farmhouse, and saw Midnight Valor grazing peacefully in the pasture, he understood something profound. The sound that had broken the silence that October evening wasn't just the sound of approaching danger. It was the sound of his life changing, the sound of redemption, second chances, and the enduring strength of the human spirit when faced with darkness. And in the end, that was the most terrifying and beautiful thing of all, the realization that everything you thought was lost could be found again, if only you were brave enough to reach for it.